So the theory is that the reason why Mark Carney is going over to China isn't to do any trade relationship, isn't to do anything like that. Hey, if he can get something, then that's going to make him look great, or at least position himself to look great to everybody back in Canada who supports him. But the real reason is so that he ticks off Donald Trump and provokes him. 2 weeks ago, China carried out live-fire military drills around Taiwan, openly framing them as a warning against separatists. Now, after criticizing Donald Trump carrying out an action against Venezuela, Prime Minister Mark Carney is traveling to Beijing in order to attempt to cozy up to President Xi Jinping. At the same time, 2 Liberal MPs that were visiting Taiwan were instructed to leave during Carney's visit. Is this prudent diplomacy, or is this showing hypocrisy and global cowardice against a tyrannical authoritarian government? Let's take a look.
It has been more than 4 years since the 2 Michaels were released from 3 years of detention in China on trumped-up charges. Their case brought Canada-China relations to a new low. But now, Prime Minister Mark Carney appears ready to begin a new chapter with China, and one of those Michaels has a caution.
Economic interaction with China now comes with a much higher price tag of measures you have to take to protect democracy, human rights, security, and sovereign independence.
Carney's first goal of this trip, get China to drop its boycott of Canadian canola. The question is, what will Canada give up? Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says it cannot be accepting Chinese electric vehicles, and experts agree.
My hope is that that solution doesn't include dropping the tariffs on EVs, even a little bit. Those tariffs are really important for our auto sector.
If Canada does that, then it would hollow out its automobile manufacturing sector within a decade.
So that's the beginning of this trip. So funny that right after China walks away from 1 million barrels of oil a day from Venezuela, because that now belongs to the United States, and there's risk of displacement of around 1 million barrels a day of oil from Alberta to the United States, that Carney is going over to China. This is not a surprise. It's interesting, though, that he's going to go over there and try to get some sort of deal with China. Here's the problem. China is a massive economy. The issue is that there's not a lot that they need from Canada. There's very little. Canola is one of them. And the position that the Liberals are taking and will take is that, we're going to, open up this massive trade deal with China. Everything's made there. There's not going to be much that they want to give us money for. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens because, as we all know, Mark Carney visited China immediately before deciding to run for the Liberal leadership. What was the conversation there? We don't know, and we will never most likely know what happened when he went over there. But we're going to have some idea as to what he's going to be offering in the next couple of weeks after he comes back from China. And this is all in the wake of during the election where he said, there's a lot of folks in Asia that, we can partner with and that share our values. China doesn't. Yet here he is, because it's anything but American. That's basically been the Carney and the Liberal stance since Trump took office and since the trade war. Now, you can't blame people for being ticked off at Trump over the trade war. We're ticked off at Trump for doing the trade war and the tariffs. I don't like it when another country tariffs my country into oblivion, because that has a very, very poor effect on everything. We're seeing tons of people losing their jobs. The problem is Carney is talking to everybody but the guy he should actually be talking to, which is Donald Trump. And you have to wonder the reasons that he's going over to China right now. But we'll get back to those a little later. The interesting part is what happened 2 weeks ago.
China has fired rockets toward Taiwan on its second day of military drills around the island. The Defense Ministry in Taipei confirmed Chinese troops carried out live fire exercises again on Tuesday. Beijing says the drills are a warning to the self-governing territory, which it sees as a breakaway province. Taiwan's president has expressed his, quote, strongest condemnation of the drills, accusing Beijing of deliberately trying to undermine regional stability.
Day 2 of China's show of strength. China's military released this footage evidently to demonstrate its ability to ward off any external armed support for Taiwan. It sent destroyers, frigates, fighters and bombers to the waters surrounding the island. There, Beijing's forces carried out long-range live-fire drills for a second day.
Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. The relevant drills conducted by China's People's Liberation Army are a punitive response to Taiwan independent separatist forces seeking independence by force, and a necessary action to defend national sovereignty and territorial integrity.
So not even 2 weeks ago, China is firing warning shots all over the place near Taiwan. This week, liberals were visiting there. This week, Carney decides to go and talk to China. You know, an authoritarian regime, an actual tyranny, while condemning and trying to imply that Donald Trump is a tyrant down in the United States. Meanwhile, he removed a dictator. Carney's going to go to talk to a dictator. And Justin Trudeau, as we all remember, admired the basic dictatorship that's in China, right? So I want all this context to be in place for what has happened. What has happened? Well, 2 Liberal MPs, as we said, were visiting Taiwan. And they got a phone call to get out. 2 Liberal MPs cut Taiwan trip short ahead of Carney's visit. 2 Canadian MPs from the governing Liberal caucus have cut short a trip to Taiwan this week that would have overlapped with Prime Minister Mark Carney's visit to Beijing aimed at patching up relations with China. They say they are returning home early, quote, informed by advice from, end quote, the Canadian government. Liberal members of Parliament Helena Jacek and Marie-France Lalonde were part of a group of MPs, including 3 Conservatives, who accepted a trip sponsored by the government of Taiwan to visit the self-governed island, which is in the crosshairs of Beijing. The trip includes both cultural events and meetings with Taiwanese government officials. On Monday in Taipei, the 2 Liberal MPs informed their Conservative colleagues that they were heading home early. China, which views Taiwan as a breakaway province, dislikes it when foreign politicians or government officials meet with Taiwanese officials, viewing it as interference in their domestic affairs. That includes the twice-yearly trips by Canadian parliamentarians. In a statement to the Globe and Mail on Monday, the 2 MPs said, quote, Canada's position on Taiwan has not changed, and our focus in this visit has been on meetings related to trade, culture, and strong people-to-people engagement, end quote. They said they had decided to cut the trip short after talking to Canadian government officials. Quote, it's important that we avoid confusion with Canada's foreign policy given the overlap with the Prime Minister's engagement in Beijing, which was only confirmed last week, end quote, Ms. Jacek and Ms. Lalonde said. Quote, we remain committed to efforts by the Prime Minister to expand sustainable and diverse trade relationships in the Indo-Pacific region, end quote. Conservative foreign affairs critic Michael Chong called the Liberal MP's early return bowing to authoritarianism. Quote, ordering elected representatives home to avoid offending an authoritarian regime sends a clear message. Convenience comes before principle, end quote, Mr. Chong said. Quote, this kind of retreat weakens our democracy, our relationship with Taiwan, and rewards Beijing's intimidation, end quote. He said Taiwan should not be a liability for Canadian government officials. Quote, Taiwan is a partner in democracy with a strong relationship between people on trade and with a shared commitment to freedom and the rule of law. China, under President Xi Jinping, regularly voices its desire to annex Taiwan and has not precluded using force to acquire it. The People's Liberation Army just recently wrapped up its latest series of military drills around the island. Defeated nationalist forces retreated to Taiwan in 1949 after they lost the Chinese Civil War on the mainland to Mao Zedong's communists. So, what's the difference, Mr. Carney, between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump? It's actually a big difference. Xi Jinping wasn't elected. They practice communism in China. And they're actually firing rockets and missiles around a country that they want to take over against their will. Nobody is out cheering in the streets in Taiwan after these drills. And China threatens anyone around them for bringing it up. Philippines brought something up a couple of years ago, and they continue to bring it up in terms of saying, China should stay out of Taiwan. And China warns the Philippines, you better stay out of it or you could be next. This is not the same. It's not. And why would we be talking to a country that not so long ago abducted 2 citizens of Canada in response to Canada arresting the Huawei princess on the request of the United States? So there's so many things here. The public inquiry shows blatant interference by China. The intimidation of Joe Tay to the point where he had to stop campaigning. Like, there are so many reasons why we should not be getting in further bed with China. So the theory is that the reason why Mark Carney is going over to China isn't to do any trade relationship, isn't to do anything like that. Hey, if he can get something, then that's going to make him look great, or at least position himself to look great to everybody back in Canada who supports him. But the real reason is so that he ticks off Donald Trump and provokes him. And gets Trump talking more to the point where Trump talks about annexing Canada again. That's the theory. And why? Carney knows there's going to be a bunch of by-elections coming up for the Liberals. Carney knows that he's not going to have a majority, even if another floor crosser crosses from the Conservatives during these by-elections. So the theory is that he's drumming up Trump to get angry at Canada. So that's his new election platform, to try and scare everybody again into voting for the Liberals. And if that is the case, swing voters, is this the type of person that you want to be the leader of Canada? That will use international strife, that will actively provoke leaders from other organizations, including the country that is our closest ally, whether people want to admit it or not. The United States is our closest ally, in order to secure power. Remember Justin Trudeau? He was saying, the only reason why Pierre Poilievre wants an election is so he can get in power. Well, the only reason why you didn't want an election is so you could remain in power. So, what do you want? But Mark Carney seems to want to provoke Donald Trump into threatening to come into Canada, even as unserious as that threat may be, in order to goad him into trying to scare the heck out of Canadians, because he knows the mainstream media will pick up on that, and that's all you'll hear about. Mainstream media didn't really talk too much about Taiwan being fired at by China a couple weeks ago. The rest of the world did, but that would be inconvenient because Mark Carney is trying to cozy up to China right now. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is what's going on right now. And in my humble opinion, the fact that these 2 MPs were told to get out of Taiwan while Carney's there, what does that say? I don't have to really phrase it anyway, because Michael Chong said it best. This is the Liberals bowing to an authoritarian government. And it just shows how weak this Liberal government and Canadian quote-unquote leadership actually is.